Alright, somehow we are now going to do this with a 35 CP Galuf. Not even an EX for him. Opening up with Grand Delta, of course. Get that fatal arrow buff on everyone. And then we want to get, we're using Onion Knight for imperal enchant here. So we want to get that going as soon as we can. We're going to start with, however you pronounce that, evasion for Galuf. That way, at least one out of the 3 people have evasion. As opposed to starting with cover and then nobody has evasion. And for Onion Knight, we started with multi-hit. The reason for that is on Onion Knight's free turn, we used the Ice Enchant because Onion Knight's Ice Enchant is going to be very key to this, and so I want to get as many of them as I can. And then the multi-hit will allow Onion Knight to get another turn to use his EX and apply the Ice Imperal to everyone. Trey on his second turn there is using Firewall, so that way we don't get too risky with the orb. I'm bringing Onion Knight back into wizard mode or whatever that thing was called in order to slow him down, so that way he doesn't run out of the ice enchants too quickly. Whenever you're using Onion Knight as an enchanter, if you're going to try and use Sword and Sorcery to get free ice enchants, which I am going to do, you'll want to use Sword and Sorcery when Onion Knight gets down to 2 more uses of his ice enchant. Or 2 more turns of it, I should say. he starts out with 2 uses. We're going to Rain of Arrows with Trey, because I like Rain of Arrows. It's one of my favorite skills in the game. It's a lot of fun. And it's a powerful skill, especially when Trey is synergy. And there's the Sword and Sorcery. One thing to keep in mind when using Galuf for something like this, I really hope you're not using Galuf in this manner, but if you are, Galuf doesn't actually get 100% evasion until he uses the plus version of his evasion skill, which used to be called Blade Grasp, and now it's called something I can't pronounce. And I used Trey's 665 earlier in order to get his Rain of Arrows to charge up to 2 charges a little quicker. Even though it wasn't necessarily necessary. I mean, when you have fights like this with a tight turn count, Trey is not going to run out of skills. Especially when you add Onion Knight in, who can help Trey to regain his skills. And more Ice Enchant. And a Meteoroid for the Ice Imperal and damage. And that will keep Onion Knight out of ninja mode, so he doesn't get too many turns too quickly and run through his Ice Enchant. So now that Trey has ZLD, you get into kind of funny situations where it's like, do I use my Charge 2 skill or do I use Grand Delta? And I'm not sure there's a huge difference between using the 2. Technically, Rain of Arrows might actually do more damage because it has more hits and more HP dumps. At least over the course of the next several turns, it will probably do more damage. But then with Grand Delta, you get the Fatal Arrow debuff, which ups everyone's Brave damage and causes an auto break on all Brave attacks. So, yeah, it depends on the situation. I probably could have gotten away with a Rain of Arrows earlier instead of Grand Delta, but now I can use it here. And not much more to say about Galuf. I mean, he's set up and he's just gonna take the hits for everyone and dodge a bunch of them and counterattack. As of right now, his counterattacks are doing something, but pretty soon they're just gonna go back down to doing almost nothing. And even now, I'd argue they're doing almost nothing. I don't know, I mean 22,000. That's decent. I mean, considering he doesn't even have any X right now. That's something. But that number's gonna go down once we lower the enemy's HP. So this ends up being a really close fight in several ways. We're racing a couple of things here. One is the really tight turn count of 60 turns. We're racing that orb. And we're racing Onion Knight running out of his ice enchant. And see, I'm trying to swipe because I thought I was on Trey. But then I'm like, oh, I'm on Galuf. I guess I'll just cover, because with Galuf taking the hits for the others, he is constantly getting pushed back, and so he gets fewer turns, which is absolutely alright with me, considering he's not going to do much on his turns, but that will allow him to basically never run out of skills. And I pretty much don't need to worry about an HP attack from these guys until they get down to 50%. I have an Aerith Caw, just in case Galuf dies. And my plan here, yes, Sword and Sorcery, because we're down to only 2 turns of the Ice Enchant. Ability Recovery, because we'll get those extra charges on Raining Arrows and Grand Delta. One of the important reasons, I didn't mention it earlier, but one of the important things about using Sword and Sorcery at the right time in this battle is to get the Ice Imperil on the enemy when that, because they take a lot of turns really quickly, and so the Ice Imperil can wear off before Onion Knight gets his Meteorite charged back up again. Even in rare cases, Blade Torrent charged back up again. So you have to be careful with Enchant Imperil teams here, because they like to run out of their Imperil. Shiva as a summon really helps with that, though, upping everyone's speed for this battle, because the enemy is very fast. And I have to be careful here with running out of the orb on A. Luckily that's not going to happen. But when it comes to Trey and the orb for this battle, I can usually go 1 or 2 rounds without the fire wall debuff on the enemy, 1 or 2 turns with Trey, before it gets low enough to where Trey has to start using it again. And the Imperal Enchant, not the Imperal Enchant, the Imperal itself has worn off. And oh, that yellow aura. So one of the things that kind of messes this team up is if they get a yellow aura and they don't have Fatal Arrow on them, and clearly Grand Delta is not up right now, they push themselves back. And so the only way I'm going to get rid of that yellow aura, because right now they're reducing all their brave damage to 1, and they're reducing their HP damage by a lot. So the only way I'm going to get rid of it is when they HP attack, and then Galuf will evade it, and he will counter it, and he will break them. But when they delay themselves going into the yellow aura, it takes longer for them to attack, and then get broken by Galuf's counterattack. So, kind of a bummer for this particular setup, but very helpful for other teams that don't have Galuf in it. I'm focusing most of my efforts on A because A is still taking full HP damage. So right now we're at turn 30, which is halfway through the turn allowance, and they have way more than 50% HP left, so we're way behind on damage efficiency. But I'm hoping to make up for that when I swap Galuf out for Ramza. Ramza, as a friend, was very key for this, because Ramza provides a burst effect, which will immensely improve Trey's damage as well. So with Ramza's burst effect and Onion Knight's burst effect, I expect to hit very hard with everybody. And 2, with Ramza's LB, he has delay, and so I plan on not giving them any turns while Ramza is out while Galuf has been swapped out with Ramza. Otherwise they could very easily just get a bunch of turns in a row and kill us. Get Onion Knight back out of ninja mode, so that way he gets his next turn later. So his ice enchant, we get more turns out of it with Trey. We're going to use cover there. That'll battery Trey a bit for Trey's attack here. Unfortunately, with A being shielded, Grand Delta is going to do a lot less overall damage, but that's just the mechanic. I really don't care that A has all that brave, because Galuf is going to avoid the HP attack, and so I'm focusing my damage on B. And there's the HP attack. There's the counter, and there's the break. Once they get below 49% HP, or 50%, whatever it is, then those flying things, cats or whatever, are going to start using a brave and HP attack that deals magic damage, which means Galuf only has a 60% chance to evade it. Maybe more with Esperzana, but it's easily the most dangerous part of this whole thing. I mean, this whole fight's pretty crazy, but that's going to be the most dangerous part, which is why I brought Aerith Call for Onion Knight. I'm going to Blade Torrent here, and the reason for that is I'm worried about doing enough damage with everyone, and I'm worried about them getting too many turns in a row, and so I'll Blade Torrent with Onion Knight to get his next turn up a little quicker. We'll Sword and Sorcery to grab everybody else. Doesn't really matter who we target too much. I probably would have been slightly better off targeting Galuf before Trey, due to the fact that Galuf could have just batteried Trey with his cover, but not a big deal. Look at this, Trey's back to 9 charges of raining arrows again. And I have to be a little bit careful about using the AAs, or using the free abilities on, or the ability restores on the free abilities, due to the fact that right now I don't have a way to charge the orb, and so I don't want to get that too out of control. And Onion Knight out of ninja mode to again allow Trey to get more turns with the ice enchant up. And they just broke everybody there. This part gets really close because A's orb is getting low. Luckily that broke Trey. I know it's kind of weird to say. Luckily that broke Trey, getting him closer to A without taking as many turns, because I'm worried about that orb right now, and that will allow Trey to get Firewall back up more easily. I'm actually really surprised it's hitting as hard as it is, due to the fact that there's no ice imperal on the enemy. But that's synergy for you, I suppose. Plus A still has a few more turns of his AA up. That might be helping a bit. Alright, we're just getting them to half HP, and we're at 45 out of 60 turns. So, definitely a little behind on damage. And that meteoroid actually hit pretty hard, considering they had no ice imperal. And for a few turns, we have lots of debuffs on them that will allow for more brave damage. Of course, B goes into the yellow aura and gets broken right away. Thank you, Grand Delta. So I'm getting a little bit low on Onion Knight's skills, but that's okay. I'm not too worried considering I expect to do a whole ton of damage once I pull out Ramza. So yeah, this is the dangerous part where they can brave it and HP attack Galuf with a magical attack that he doesn't have 100% evasion of, and with him being so low in stats, he's got really low amounts of HP and is at great risk of dying. Luckily that hasn't happened yet. So as far as when I want to pull Ramza out, I want to time it so that Ramza gets to use his burst, and then while Ramza's burst effect is out, I want Onion Knight to use his burst, and then with both burst effects out, I then want to go into the Shiva Sun. That would be a perfect circumstance. But I'm just laughing at how much damage Onion Knight does. Sometimes I forget. And even Galuf is doing some interesting counterattack damage. But anyways. Oh, there's the Braven HP attack, and he does not dodge it, but very luckily, he was batteried by Trey's Rain of Arrows, and did not get broken from it, so he lived it. Although I guess I do technically have one Prayer of the Cetra call. I'm pulling out Ramza because I don't want to risk another Braven HP attack on Galuf, and right now, they both have Ice Enchant on them, so I know Ramza can hit hard with his burst. And so now I have kind of a decision to make. Like, do I summon now and risk them getting a few turns? And see if I can unbreak A, but that's not going to happen. A is not going to come out of break for a while. Now's probably a good time to use Dynamite Arrow. So yeah, I decided to take the risk. So luckily, Trey's trap went off there and gave Onion Knight his turn. So now we are in burst mode with Onion Knight, and B has a launch. So I'm like, when's the best time to launch? I guess when Ramza comes out of break, and then I can Brave Battery them all. But what if I can do it now and pull Ramza out of break? Look at all that damage from basically no Brave, and then Ramza does like nothing. Disappointing Ramza. But Ramza also doesn't have the plus versions of his Brave attack yet, so that explains that. I pull Ramza with the Sword and Sorcery in front of Trey, so that way when Ramza launches, Trey will be set up for it. Now I could do another Ice Imperal enchant here while in the burst, but I still have one more use of it, so I don't think that's necessary. I'm just going to go for the damage. Plus, we only have 7 more turns, technically, and so yeah, I want to get as much damage as I can. I'm going to go with Spellbook here, because I believe it will cap. Yeah, it's definitely going to cap, and so it's going to do almost 20,000 damage to each of them, as opposed to Ninjutsu, which would only do about maybe 35,000 to one of them. It deals a little bit less. And the orb is going away. They're both at 29%, and they're both down to the red orbs only. I'd like to try and use a launch, Ramza's LD, before going into summon, but even pushing them back one, Onion Knight won't be in the launch. So I summon, and time to do some damage. Some big damage. Yeah, those are the kind of launches we like to see, 350,000. And that doesn't even include what we're going to do with Trey. So, my thought here is I can use the calls, because that's just going to delay them once I'm done with summon. Not delay them, but I'll still have an extra turn once they're out of summon. That ended up not being a great idea, and I'll figure it out in a minute, due to the fact that I'm more likely to run out of turns at this point than get killed by them, especially with Ramza pushing them back. At least that's what I was thinking as I got closer to the end of the summon, because I'm like, wait a minute, that's using my free turns up. And this Rain of Arrows is doing a ton of damage. Let's see, do I multi-hit or Blizzard Orb? I feel kind of salty for not using any of Aerith's calls, because it would be free damage. So yeah, I kind of make a mistake here. I'm like, oh, I'll just battery everybody up for that launch. And then I'm like, wait a minute. I just used up one of my last free turns in a summon. Like, maybe that wasn't such a great idea. I do plan on using Prayer of the Cetra for Onion Knight to give that huge magical damage up from it. And yeah, now I've got 5 turns left to do a lot of damage to them. But luckily I have 2 burst effects going right now. And luckily I'm doing max damage, and these flying cat things are glass cannons. Yeah, that call was just to get the call ability up under Onion Knight so he can get the additional damage from Aerith, but it probably wasn't even necessary, so I'm glad I didn't use that in the summon. Oh, this is so close. I've got 3 more turns after this, but that took them from like, what, 8% or something, or 10%. Now they're down to 4 and 6%. And that's when I was like, oh my god, this is possible. We're gonna use the call just to get some damage. That took them down to 3%. And then, do I use Dynamite Arrow or Firewall? I make the correct decision and use Firewall. I believe that will end up doing more damage than Dynamite Arrow. And I believe Ramza is out of launches. So time to Meteorite. And the moment of truth is now upon us. Ramza's out of LDs, he's got his EX, they're both at 1%. I have literally 1 turn left. I really, really wanted to launch, but it worked. Huzzah! And that was Trey's Lost Chapter Lufenia with a 35 CP Galuf. Just barely making that turn count. Trey is 3-3 with his LD, Onion Knight's 3-3 with LD and Burst, for the record. And there's my 35 CP Galuf. Thank you for watching.